But those tuning in, we're at Edisto Beach State Park at the Environmental Learning Center. Our nature center is closed, but our park, as well as the other 46, are open. So definitely go check them out. For now, I am going to turn it over to Lucas. Hey, and then there's Pat. That's our staff here at Edisto Beach State Park Environmental Learning Center. So we're going to turn it over to him. So in the ACE Basin, we have 4 different habitats here. First one is uplands. That's going to be more so a freshwater pond, stream. It's going to be closer to Highway 17. That's where our freshwater saltwater line is. So below that, or I guess east of that, is going to be brackish water. So we don't have a whole lot of habitat like this on the island, but it's still present in the ACE Basin. So here we have 2 warmouth. The funny thing about warmouth is that they're very secretive and somewhat nocturnal. So they're hiding in a pot. So they're not really, Lucas is gonna zoom in on that. Can't really see it, but we do have 2 fish in there. It appears to be empty, but it's not. And those tuning in, we're at Edisto Beach State Park, and I'm starting with feeding. Right here we have warmouth, and this is probably my least favorite food. We're feeding them night crawlers. Yummy. So it's what would be in their natural environment. They're a very secretive fish, and they're not gonna, okay, that's okay. They're very secretive. They live in ponds and streams. They're actually pretty adapted to living in areas that have low oxygen content. So we aerate all of our tanks, but if for some reason those failed, they would still be able to survive. Fun fact about them, the males, when they're in mating, their eyes will turn red, and will actually, I've seen one of them have red eyes, so we know there's at least 1 male in there. Don't know about the other one. And then they have on their tongue, they have this like tooth patch to help aid with eating. They eat other crustaceans. So that's a little bit about them. If you guys have any questions about that, I can definitely answer them. But those tuning in, again, is it not working?
Here, people can't hear you very well.
Oh, okay, cool. I'll try and speak louder. Next up, we'll move over to our estuary tank. Estuaries are where freshwater meets saltwater, and that is a lot of what is surrounding us in the coastal community. From Highway 17 down. Estuaries are known as the nursery of the sea, and so there's a lot of breeding that happens. It's a lot of nursery, so a lot of smaller animals seek the estuaries as habitat. What we have in here are 2 oyster toadfish. It's not a very pretty fish. It's a face only a mother could love. We're going to be feeding them shrimp. They're pretty common in the estuaries. They have a, you can't really see it, but I'm going to point to it. They have this spine for defense on their gills. That they, you know, if you do fish with them, or you do get them, you have to be careful with getting it off the hook. So they're known, you can't really see it, but they do have somewhat legs, and they are able to be out of water for at least 6 hours. So they're adapted to that. They're actually adapted to living in areas that have pollution or litter. So when they mate and they have eggs, they'll actually lay eggs in like old tin cans. They'll live in tires. And that makes them a really important part of marine research. And so they're pretty vocal, and we actually found, well, they're doing weird things. We actually found that this is a mating pair. So the larger one is a male and the smaller one is a female. As for the light color, their colors being different, we're not really sure the reasoning for that. Could be just how me and you are different. But we found one day that there were eggs in here. They weren't viable, but then they made it again, and we do have more eggs. We're not sure if they're going to last, but the male will actually make this foghorn noise. We actually were lucky enough to hear it. So we have a mating pair. But we're going to be feeding them shrimp, just classic shrimp, bait shrimp. They're very aggressive eaters. I'm going to try and get the smaller one to do it. She'll actually grip on to the tongs and shake. Oh, okay. He's hungry. Estuaries are a pretty important part of our ecosystem, not only environmentally, but also economically. A lot of our seafood, so our shrimp, our scallops, our fish, come from the estuaries. So it's important that we keep those healthy, just for that fact. Let me see if we could get her to eat. Oh, he's waiting.
He is.
He is. So I don't know if you guys caught that, but he has like these little legs. We're going to try and get her to eat, but she might not eat. Yeah, she's not eating. And those tuning in, we are at Edisto Beach State Park. I'm Sam, the interpreter here. We're just feeding our fish. All of these fish are native to the area.
So before we move on, we have a few questions.
Okay.
Concerning the warmouth, how long are they?
Those are probably currently about this big. They get a little bit bigger, but not by much. They're actually a type of sunfish. So anybody that is freshwater fishing, it's your standard like bluegill, pumpkin, sunfish. They're just a little bit more aggressive.
Awesome. And how old are they?
That I'm not sure of. We've had them for about a year.
Okay. And another question, where do we get the water for our tanks? And is it salt?
That is a very good question. So for this tank, we use tap water. So it's slightly brackish, but not enough so to affect them. The other tanks that we have an RO system, so reverse osmosis, where it takes everything out of the water, and then we put salt in the water. So everything else in here besides this tank is a saltwater tank. Moving on. So we have some mealworms and pupa here. That is actually, we grow those here. We have our own little mealworm farm. Pretty cool. Next up is going to be our Maritime Forest habitat. So right now we have 4 southern toads in here. Those are amphibians. They are found here. So the thing about amphibians, they breathe through their skin. So they're an indicator species. If they're present in their environment, that means that the water quality is healthy, there's food available. They can't have anything that's not healthy because of the fact that their skin is permeable. So we got some chubby toads in there. That one right there, you can see, hasn't really missed a meal. So they're insectivores, hence the mealworms. But Maritime Forest is the living room for nature. So we have birds, reptiles, amphibians, mammals, all sorts of critters that live there. And if you are into trees, there's only about 6 or 7 trees that are adapted to this environment. So I'm a little vertically challenged, so I can't quite reach them, but we put those mealworms in there, and they're sight feeders, so they'll be able to see them wiggling. And you can see that the one on the left is lighter in color than the one on the right, and that's just varying colors, so there's a variability there. And those tuning in, again, we're here at Edisto Beach State Park. I'm Sam, Lucas is filming, and we're feeding our toads. We used to have one that would actually feed off the tongs, and that was pretty cool. They have, and this one, since he zoomed in on it, they have parotid glands. Those are those lumps behind the eyes, and they contain a bufotoxin. That actually is pretty harmful to anything that eats it. And then also, when they have their eggs are coated in toxin to help protect from predators.
So we have another question here.
Yeah.
Are the mealworms alive?
Yes, they are. The pupa are kind of wiggly, but the mealworms are living. So it goes through this whole cycle where it starts out as a bug. It lays eggs. The eggs turn into mealworms. The mealworms turn into pupa. And then from the pupa, it goes back to bug. Next up, we are going to go over to our coastal marine tank, which is typically your ocean, but it goes hand in hand with our estuary. You'd find the same fish species in the estuary as coastal marine. So if we turn around here, George, our black sea bass, is really ready to eat. We feed him shrimp as well as minnows, so I'll be putting minnows in there. The black sea bass is in the grouper family. They're mainly found in estuaries, but they do go offshore, and they're bottom feeders, so actually all of our fish here are bottom feeders. He is super ready to eat. The thing about black sea bass, they start out as females and then they turn to male, so they're hermaphroditic. So when they reach 2 to 4 years old, or 9 to 13 inches, they'll actually make the transition from female to male, which is pretty cool. They're not really sure why they do it. It could be just the need for males. A male will typically have a lot more mates, so he'll have a group of females. We'll give him some more shrimp. Whoa. So those tuning in again, this is our coastal tank. We've already pre-fed our other tanks. I'm gonna grab minnows, which the minnows we actually go out and collect, or we'll have help from some of our volunteers that do so. So minnow is just your standard mud minnow. You use it for live bait. These guys, unfortunately, will meet their maker. We also have over here, we have a flounder. He's kind of blending in, and hopefully we can get just swimming right over. Flounder is a flatfish, and they're ambush predators. So you can see that he's pretty well blended in. They have chromatophores, so that helps their skin change color. So if he were in dark substrate, he would be darker of color. Both of their eyes are on one side of their body. That's called the ocular side. And they're known as being a near top predator because of that. Both of these fish are a source of seafood. The black sea bass, their populations are pretty good, so they're sustainable. Flounder, unfortunately, there's some limits, and they've been doing some counts, and their population numbers in South Carolina are at a record low. So that's pretty unfortunate. South Carolina DNR is working on trying to get that fixed, placing more limitations. These guys, unfortunately, are full from yesterday, so they're not really going to eat anymore. But we'll head on to our touch tank. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, so do we have snakes here at the center?
We do. So we have a corn snake, and we have a couple of yellow rat snakes. They're pretty small, not as exciting as Megan's yesterday, but they'll eventually get a little bit bigger.
And how long do the toads live?
They can live up to 4 to 5 years, maybe even more than that. It's not nearly going to be as long-lived as, say, a reptile. Okay. We're going to head over to our touch tank. We have a few different things in there that I'll talk about. So in our touch tank, we'll start off with our hermit crabs. We have 4 or 5 different hermit crabs in here, and of course they're pretty shy. So he already went up into a shell. Hermit crabs need this shell to survive. Without it, they're pretty tasty and they're vulnerable. And as they grow, they move from shell to shell. So actually, that's why if you look around, you'll notice that there's a few empty shells. We do that so that way they can go house shopping. We have to make sure that they're pretty well fed. They're scavengers, so they are going to eat whatever that's edible. So that is detritus or broken down matter. That is algae, anything. We feed them shrimp, but they probably eat other stuff in here. So there's been a few times that we were missing hermit crabs because they decided to go after each other. So we make sure that they're very well fed. These are marine hermit crabs. So that means that they live in water all the time. You have a freshwater species, you have multiple land species, but this one is native here, and it needs salt water. Doesn't have very many predators because of the fact that it has a shell. But the one thing, beach goers, you're walking the beach, you see a really cool shell. I've done it myself in college. See a really cool shell, you pick it up, you don't realize that there's something living in there until you get home and your shell is crawling. So double check before you leave the beach that there's nothing in your shell. So I'm going to give these guys some shrimp. And actually, if Lucas, you want to pan down here so that people can see. You can see the claws. He's pretty aggressive. And those tuning in, we're here at Edisto Beach State Park. I'm Sam, and Lucas is my cameraman. We are feeding our touch tank. So we have hermit crabs right now. This one's pretty big. And we usually give them a couple of pieces of shrimp, and then I'll actually drop some shrimp so that way they can go hunt for some. So there's 3. I just saw another one. It's kind of like looking for a needle in a haystack for these guys. We have a bunch of minnows in here. That's because we have a red drum or a redfish in here. You guys can see.
So we have a few more questions here. How could somebody tell if there's something living in the shell?
What we usually do to try and find our hermit crabs, we'll stick our finger up there, but I don't know if you actually want to do that. But if you look, I'll show you an empty one. If they're big enough, you should be able to see their claws, the tips of their claws. But if not, usually if it's, in my case, when I'm going shelling, if it's a pretty shell, I usually always assume that there's something in there. But we usually stick our finger in there. But you'd be able to see the claws.
Cool. And do we have any turtles, lizards, or birds?
We do have turtles. We have 4 species of turtles. No, 3 species. So we have 2 diamondback terrapins, like Buddy yesterday. And then we have a box turtle and a mud turtle. That's not all that we have in the state. We have other species, but those are what we have here.
Cool. And how many total hermit crabs do we have?
I just counted 4. I hope that's what we have. I might have to go back and look. I already talked about the flounder, but this is actually really cool. That way you could see how well it blends in. We have another flounder in our touch tank. So you can really see those chromatophores and the eyes on top of the head. So he is just waiting for one of those minnows to just swim right above him so he can grab them.
And how long do the crabs live for?
I don't know specifically how old, but they can get pretty big depending on the species. So, I mean, maybe 5 years, give or take. I'm not exactly sure on that. The next animal that I'll kind of talk about quickly, if I can get her, so I can show you guys. This here is a lightning whelk. She is just not happening. This is a large predatory snail. She is currently suctioned on the bottom of the touch tank. But their opening is to the right. And then, so we have knobbed whelks and lightning whelks. Knobbed whelks have it to the right, lightning whelks have it to the left. So that is it's a predatory snail, so they'll eat bivalves. So you'll see here, we have some mussels, and what they would do, since she is currently suctioned there, I'll kind of demonstrate with an actual knobbed whelk. So this would be where the snail is, and then there's like a trap door. It's called an operculum, and this edge is pretty sharp, so she'll kind of wedge her way into and wedge the bivalve open, and then feed once it's fully open. So right here is how a mussel would look after a whelk ate it. It would be perfectly open, no cracks, nothing. So they just pop it open and then eat the contents inside. We have one more species to talk about. This guy right here, this is a red drum or redfish spot tail. He is in the drum species. So they have these special muscles that rub against the swim bladder to make a drumming noise. Pretty large fish, could be 45 inches, up to 50 pounds. They mainly stay inshore, but they do go offshore as well. They are actually not very far swimmers, so if you find them, typically where you find them is not very far from where they live or where they were born. So we'll actually put some pretty big minnows in there. So Lucas, just be pretty spot right in front. We'll try and get him eating this very large minnow. Or just swim right next to him. No big deal. Not very exciting. No? Okay. Well, that was. But typically, as soon as we put minnows in here, he goes after them.
I think he's just a little bit camera shy.
Yeah, I think all of them are a little camera shy today. Really?
Oh dear.
Oh my, oh, nope, really? Okay, well. Does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah.
About anything?
So with the hermit crabs, when do they get their first shell?
Well, when they are born, they're planktonic, so they're just kind of swimming. So it really, I don't know the specific size, but I'm just about this big, until it can fit into a shell. And then as they grow, they get into bigger shells.
Cool. And how long do the flounder live for?
About 5-6 years, maybe more than that, depending on if it's in captivity like ours or out in the wild.
Cool. And do any of the fish here have names?
Yes. So this redfish, his name is Bob. So anytime we have a redfish, his name is Bob. Our black sea bass, that is George. All of them are George. Flounder is a variety of names. Pancake, Waffle, I think we named one because it got pretty chubby. The one in the touch tank, we made a funny name, that's the bucket flounder.
He lived in a bucket for about a week or so.
The toadfish are named Oscar. And then the warmouth, we don't have names for. But that's... Any other questions?
Yeah, what is the biggest animal that we have here?
Lucas. No, it would probably be either marsh or American alligator. Although that picture that was posted, that was from 2 years ago, so marsh is much bigger than that. Or turnip is our diamondback terrapin. She's about the size of Buddy.
Cool. And how long do redfish live for?
They can live up to 40 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
About how much would a hermit crab weigh, do you think?
A couple of ounces, maybe. There's some pretty large ones that are terrestrial, and they can get pretty big. But ours, they don't get necessarily that big.
All right. And are the hermit crabs that are sold in stores native to South Carolina, and are these crabs okay to have as pets?
Very good question. The ones that are sold in the stores are not native. That would be a terrestrial one. They are typically found in like South America. And then these, they're fairly easy to keep as pets since they eat anything edible. That means that they're the cleaners of the tank, so they'll keep your tank clean. But you just have to be aware of the salinity and filtration, that kind of thing.
All right. And what are the turtles' names?
Turtles' names are, we have Rudy and Turnip. Those are our diamondback terrapins. Our box turtle is named Tower. And then our mud turtle is named Julius. We try and get a little creative here.
Cool. And do we have any dolphins here?
We do. They're up and down in the estuaries, and sometimes they go offshore. There are populations that stay here year-round. So in the winter, you can still see dolphins. And then there's populations that kind of migrate. But I always get the question of when are the dolphins going to show up? And it's pretty tough to tell people that because they're nature has its own timeline. You kind of just have to be there at the right time.
Cool. And how long have we had the alligator skeleton over there?
Probably since the building was built. Not too sure about the history of it. It is a mold of an alligator, a real alligator, and it was put together by some people that came in here. And that is probably about a 12 to 13 footer.
Wow, cool. And what do you think the most popular animal is here at the center?
I would probably say either the turtles or the alligator.
Cool, cool. Well, all right, I think that's about all the questions here.
Well, thank you guys for tuning in. This video will be posted, and Megan's is still posted from yesterday, and then we're going to be doing this throughout the week and the next upcoming weeks, so definitely tune in, and thank you guys for tuning in and watching.
All right.